My name is Allison Carter, and at 28 years old, I never expected to be standing in my parents' dining room watching my father's face turn purple with rage. The words that followed shattered our family's perfect facade: "You're no longer my daughter." Thanksgiving dinner sat untouched as I revealed the truth about Dad's business dealings. Years of loyalty and hard work erased in seconds. My mother gasped, my brother Tyler stared in disbelief, and family friends shifted uncomfortably in their seats. After dedicating my entire career to the Carter Investment Group, this was my reward. Little did he know, I had already set the wheels in motion for the ultimate revenge that would turn our family's world upside down. Before I dive into this story, where are you watching from today? Hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever stood your ground against family injustice. Trust me, you'll want to see how I transformed from the family doormat to the one who finally set things right. To understand why that Thanksgiving dinner exploded, you need to know about the Carter family. From the outside, we were the American dream: wealthy, successful, with a beautiful colonial home in Connecticut complete with a pool, tennis court, and enough square footage to get lost in. My father, Nathan Carter, built Carter Investment Group from nothing 30 years ago, turning it into a regional powerhouse managing over $300 million in assets. Business magazines featured him regularly, praising his financial genius and family values. If only they knew. Mom, Grace Carter, came from old money but surrendered her identity when she married Dad. Her sole purpose became maintaining our image, hosting charity events, serving on boards, and most importantly, never questioning Dad. She'd perfected the supportive wife smile that never quite reached her eyes. I used to think she was weak, but I've come to realize she was trapped in her own way. Then there's my brother Tyler, 3 years older and Dad's carbon copy. Tall, conventionally handsome, with that same booming voice and firm handshake that Dad used to charm clients. Tyler was groomed for succession from childhood: the right schools, the right internships, and most importantly, the right mindset to continue Dad's legacy. While I got dolls for Christmas, Tyler got junior investment books. The message was clear from the beginning. And me? I was the afterthought, the backup plan. Despite graduating top of my class with a business degree from Cornell and an MBA from Wharton, I remained Nathan's daughter rather than Allison the financial analyst. For 6 years, I worked twice as hard as any man at the firm but remained stuck in middle management. Every promotion went to someone else, usually a man with half my qualifications but twice my competence. The investment world is a man's arena, Allison, Dad would say whenever I brought it up. Clients want to see stability, authority. You have other talents. Those other talents apparently included organizing the annual company retreat and editing everyone else's presentations. Our Thanksgiving dinners were legendary in our social circle: 40 guests minimum, imported wines, gourmet food, and Dad's traditional speech about family being the foundation of success. Pure theater. We all played our roles: Dad the visionary, Mom the gracious hostess, Tyler the worthy heir, and me the supportive daughter. What no one knew was that beneath this perfect family image, Dad ruled through fear and manipulation. Conversations were minefields. Disagree with Dad, and you'd feel the chill for weeks. Financial support came with invisible strings. Tyler learned early to mirror Dad's opinions, while I developed the art of agreeable silence. I thought my Harvard business degree would finally earn his respect. Instead, when I joined the company, Dad placed me under Tyler's supervision despite my superior qualifications. Learning the family business from the ground up, he called it. In reality, it was a daily reminder of the Carter family hierarchy. The warning signs were always there. Clients who suddenly disappeared. Financial reports with sections only Dad could access. Employees terminated for asking too many questions. But loyalty blinded me. Nathan Carter was my father, after all. He built our life. He paid for my education. Questioning him felt like betrayal. Then 3 months before that fateful Thanksgiving, I accidentally opened the door to a reality I couldn't ignore, one that would force me to choose between family loyalty and doing what's right. The most painful part wasn't discovering what Dad had done. It was realizing I'd spent my entire life seeking approval from someone who never intended to give it. No achievement would ever be enough because the game was rigged from the start. The daughter he wanted didn't exist, and the daughter I was deserved better. Looking back, I should have seen it coming. Dad's constant reminders about family loyalty. The way client meetings happened behind closed doors. How certain investors received special reports while others got standard updates. The pieces were there, but I refused to assemble the puzzle. Until I had no choice. It started with a filing error. 3 months before Thanksgiving, our head accountant James was out sick, and Dad needed the Westbrook portfolio review urgently. As senior financial analyst, I was tasked with retrieving it from our secure database. James had misfiled it in the archived projects folder, but beside it was another folder labeled NC Special Accounts. I shouldn't have clicked it. Professional curiosity, or perhaps fate, made me open it. What I found inside turned my stomach. Detailed spreadsheets tracking money movements from client accounts into offshore holdings. Fabricated performance reports showing higher returns than actually existed. Systematic transfers from family trust funds, including mine and Tyler's, into high-risk investments without our knowledge. This wasn't aggressive investing or creative accounting. This was fraud, plain and simple. The most damning document was titled Contingency Exit Strategy, outlining how to liquidate assets and transfer funds abroad if regulatory issues arose. Dad had prepared a plan to abandon everything, including us, if his schemes were discovered. I closed the files and went to the bathroom, barely making it before throwing up. My hands shook as I splashed cold water on my face. The man who lectured me about ethics and responsibility had been stealing from his own family and clients for years. Perhaps naive, I believed there must be an explanation. That evening, I waited until Mom went to bed and approached Dad in his study. He was nursing his nightly scotch, reading glasses perched on his nose as he reviewed reports. "Dad, I need to talk to you about something I found today," I began, trying to keep my voice steady. The NC Special Accounts folder. His expression changed instantly, eyes hardening as he slowly removed his glasses. "You were going through private files?" "I was looking for the Westbrook portfolio and found it by accident," I explained. "Dad, there are transfers from my trust fund on those spreadsheets. And Aunt Lydia's. And the Miller's retirement account. I need to understand what's happening." He laughed, but it wasn't his real laugh. "Allison, you're misinterpreting advanced investment strategies. Those accounts are leveraged for better overall returns." "Then why are they hidden? Why aren't they in the regular client management system?" I pressed. Dad stood, suddenly towering over me like when I was a child. "Because some investments require discretion. Do you think our high-net-worth clients want their financial movements tracked in our general system? This is why financial management requires experience, not just degrees." The condescension was familiar, but this time I didn't back down. "Dad, I saw the contingency plan. The offshore accounts." His face darkened. "That's enough. You're crossing a line. I just want the truth." "The truth?" He stepped closer. "The truth is your way out of your depth. The truth is this company provides everything you have, your apartment, your car, your lifestyle. The truth is you need to remember where your loyalties lie." "My loyalty is to doing what's right," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Dad's expression became something I'd never seen before, cold, calculating, almost predatory. "Be very careful, Allison. Financial firms are delicate ecosystems. Start spreading unfounded accusations, and you might find yourself not only without a job but without a family. Some doors, once closed, don't reopen." He wasn't even denying it anymore. He was threatening me. "Sleep on it," he continued, voice softening into something more dangerous. "Tomorrow you'll remember that you're a Carter, and Carters protect their own." I left his study on shaking legs, the reality of my situation sinking in. My father was a criminal. He'd stolen from family, friends, and clients who trusted him. And he expected me to become complicit by keeping quiet. That night, I barely slept. By morning, I knew I couldn't ignore what I'd found, but I also couldn't go to the authorities without absolute proof. Dad would destroy evidence the moment he suspected I might report him. I needed a comprehensive record of everything, and I needed allies. The next day, I met David Reynolds for coffee. David worked in our compliance department. Brilliant, principled, and the only person at the firm who treated me as an equal rather than the boss's daughter. We'd developed a friendship over the past year, though I suspected both of us wanted more but were held back by professional boundaries. I need your help, I told him, but what I'm about to share could blow up everything. You can walk away right now, no questions asked. David studied my face. I'm not walking away, Allison. What's going on? Over the next hour, I outlined what I'd discovered. David's expression grew increasingly grim. When I finished, he sat silently for a long moment. You realize what this means, he finally said. If what you're describing is accurate, your father could go to prison for a very long time. I know, I whispered. But what about all those people who trusted him? The Millers invested their entire retirement fund with us. Aunt Lydia's medical care depends on her investments. I can't be part of this. David reached across the table and took my hand. Then we need to do this right. Gather evidence, build a case, and make sure it's airtight. Because once we start, there's no going back. I felt sick but oddly relieved. Where do we start? Document everything. Access as many records as you can without raising suspicion. I'll review compliance reports from my end. And Allison, he squeezed my hand, watch your back. Men like your father don't give up power easily. And so began the most difficult period of my life, maintaining a normal facade at work and home while secretly building a case against my own father. Every dinner conversation felt like a betrayal. Every family meeting became an exercise in deception. The weight of it all was crushing. But with each document I uncovered, my resolve strengthened. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about all the people who would lose everything if Dad's scheme collapsed, and it would eventually. Financial fraud always unravels. It's just a matter of when. I decided Thanksgiving would be the moment of truth. With family and closest friends gathered, I would expose everything. It would be devastating, but it would also prevent Dad from controlling the narrative afterward. He couldn't silence a room full of witnesses. As the holiday approached, I prepared myself for the inevitable, being cut off financially, professionally, and yes, even being disowned. But I never anticipated just how thoroughly my father would attempt to destroy me when I challenged his empire. The 2 months leading up to Thanksgiving became my personal mission impossible. By day, I played the dutiful daughter and executive, smiling through meetings and family dinners. By night, I transformed into a financial detective, methodically building my case against the man who raised me. First priority was securing evidence. I created an encrypted drive documenting everything. Screenshots of the hidden accounts, records of unauthorized transfers, copies of the fabricated client reports alongside the actual performance data. I worked late when the office was empty, using my executive access to gather what I needed without triggering security alerts. Each document was another nail in the coffin I was reluctantly building for my father's career. David proved invaluable. His compliance role gave him access to records I couldn't reach. He also connected me with Lawrence Hoffman, a securities attorney who specialized in financial fraud cases. During clandestine meetings in coffee shops 3 towns over, Hoffman reviewed my growing evidence file. This is textbook securities fraud, Hoffman confirmed after our 3rd meeting. Ponzi elements, misappropriation of funds, falsified returns. The SEC would have a field day with this. What about criminal charges? I asked, my stomach churning at the thought. Virtually certain. We're talking federal prosecution, significant jail time. He studied my face. Are you prepared for that? He's still your father. Was I prepared? The question haunted me daily. Each night I'd stare at my ceiling, remembering fishing trips with Dad when I was little, how he taught me to read financial statements at 12, his proud face at my graduation. Then I'd remember the Millers, approaching retirement with what they believed was a secure nest egg, or Aunt Lydia, whose trust fund was being drained without her knowledge. I have to be prepared, I finally told Hoffman. Because I'm the only one who can stop this before more people get hurt. Next came protecting myself. I quietly opened new bank accounts at institutions with no connection to my father. I moved my personal belongings of value, jewelry, important documents, family photos, to a storage unit paid a year in advance. I began searching for apartments in the city, somewhere I could go after the inevitable explosion. The hardest part was approaching potential allies. My brother Tyler was out of the question, his loyalty to Dad was absolute, and he'd warn him immediately. Mom would crumble under the pressure of such knowledge. But there was Aunt Lydia, Dad's sister, and the one person who'd never fallen under his spell. Aunt Lydia lived in a beautiful brownstone in Boston, independently wealthy from her late husband's insurance policy and, she thought, her family trust. At 65, she remained sharp as a tack and was the only person who openly challenged Dad at family gatherings. I visited her on a Sunday afternoon, ostensibly to catch up. After an hour of general conversation, I took a deep breath. Aunt Lydia, I need to show you something, and it's going to be difficult to process. Her eyes narrowed. This sounds serious, Allison. I opened my laptop and showed her the records of withdrawals from her trust fund, over $1.2 million in the past 3 years, disguised as alternative investments. Her face drained of color. Nathan did this? Yes. And he's done it to others too. The Millers, the Hendersons, even Tyler and me. Aunt Lydia's shock quickly transformed into cold fury. That manipulative bastard. I always knew he had a dark side, but this. She looked at me. What are you planning to do? Expose everything. At Thanksgiving. A slow smile spread across her face. Count me in. And you'll stay with me afterward. You'll need somewhere to go. With Aunt Lydia's support secured, my resolve strengthened. But so did the emotional toll. I lost weight. Sleep became a luxury. At work, I caught Dad watching me with narrowed eyes, as if sensing something had changed. One evening, 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, he called me into his office. You've been distant lately, he observed, studying me over steepled fingers. Anything I should know about? Just focused on the Henderson portfolio, I lied smoothly. Their retirement timeline moved up. He didn't seem convinced. Tyler mentioned you declined the family trip to Aspen this Christmas. That's not like you. I might use the time to visit friends in California, I said, maintaining eye contact despite my racing heart. Dad leaned forward. Family traditions matter, Allison. Especially in our position. Appearances count. The irony nearly made me laugh. Appearances. That's what he was worried about, not ethics or legality or the people he was stealing from. I'll reconsider, I replied, knowing it wouldn't matter. By Christmas, everything would be different. Tyler started noticing changes too. We'd always been close despite Dad's obvious favoritism, and my withdrawal didn't go unnoticed. What's going on with you? He cornered me in the office kitchen. You're acting weird. Is it a guy? That compliance guy you're always with? I'm just stressed with work, I deflected. And yes, David and I have been spending time together. He's a good friend. Tyler's eyes narrowed. Be careful mixing business and pleasure, sis. Especially with someone in compliance. Dad wouldn't approve. If he only knew. Mom noticed too, in her way. She didn't ask directly but started bringing me tea in my home office, suggesting lunch dates, watching me with worried eyes. One evening she lingered in my doorway. Whatever's bothering you, she said softly, I hope you know you can always talk to me. Could I? Mom had spent 30 years looking the other way. What would she do if I told her the truth? The risk was too great. Just work stress, Mom. I'm fine. As Thanksgiving approached, the final pieces fell into place. Hoffman had connected me with SEC investigators who were ready to receive my evidence after the holiday. David had secured copies of compliance reports showing irregularities that had been overridden by my father. Aunt Lydia had prepared her guest room and promised her unwavering support. The night before Thanksgiving, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the packed bag in my closet. Tomorrow I would likely lose my family, my job, and the only identity I'd ever known. Was I ready? The answer came not as certainty but as a quiet conviction. Ready or not, it was time for the truth. I carefully applied my makeup the next morning, choosing a conservative burgundy dress that projected confidence. As I fastened my grandmother's pearl necklace, perhaps for the last time, I silently apologized to her for what I was about to do to the family name. Then I reminded myself that protecting the innocent from predators, even when the predator is your father, would have made her proud. I drove to my parents' house with a strange calm. Whatever happened next, I had done everything possible to prepare. The evidence was secured. My escape route planned. All that remained was to strike the match and watch the carefully constructed Carter family legacy go up in flames. Thanksgiving Day dawned crisp and clear, the kind of perfect late November weather that photographers capture for holiday cards. By noon, I was helping Mom arrange elaborate flower centerpieces in the formal dining room while caterers bustled around us. The massive table was set for 24 people with the family china and crystal that only emerged for special occasions. The Henderson Place card should be next to your father, Mom instructed, fussing with the silverware. Bill's considering increasing his investment portfolio substantially. I carefully placed the card, knowing Bill Henderson would be doing no such thing after today. Who's sitting next to me? I asked, maintaining the charade. David from your office. I hope that's all right. Your father thought it would be nice to include him since he's not going home for the holiday. She gave me a knowing smile. He speaks very highly of you. My stomach tightened. Dad had invited David. Not out of kindness, but to keep potential enemies close. Did he suspect something? Had I been too careless? That's thoughtful, I managed, checking my watch. 5 hours until dinner. 5 hours until everything changed. Guests began arriving at 4, greeted with champagne and hors d'oeuvres in the great room. The Millers came first, Robert and Catherine, in their 70s, who had entrusted their entire retirement savings to Dad. They'd been friends with my parents since before I was born. Seeing Catherine's warm smile made my heart ache. She had no idea most of her money was already gone. Next came the Patels, the Hendersons, and the Winthrops, all long-term clients and family friends. Uncle James and his wife arrived, followed by Aunt Lydia, who gave me a subtle nod as she handed her coat to the staff. More relatives and business associates filtered in until the house hummed with conversation and laughter. David arrived last, looking handsome and uncomfortable in a navy suit. Dad intercepted him immediately, clapping him on the shoulder with manufactured warmth. David. Glad you could join our family tradition. Let me introduce you around. He steered David toward a group of clients, clearly intent on keeping him occupied. I circulated through the room, making small talk while adrenaline coursed through my veins. Several times I caught Dad watching me through the crowd, his smile never reaching his eyes. Tyler worked the room with practiced charm, the perfect heir apparent, oblivious to the approaching storm. At 6 o'clock, Mom announced dinner. The procession into the dining room felt like a funeral march to me. Everyone took their assigned seats, oohing over the table's elegant presentation. Dad took his place at the head, Mom at the foot, with Tyler and me on either side. David was seated next to me, his presence both comforting and terrifying. If Dad suspected our alliance, placing David beside me was a strategic move to watch us both at once. The staff served the first course, butternut squash soup with cream fresh, as conversation flowed around business success, vacation homes, and children's achievements. I barely touched my food, my appetite non-existent as I waited for the right moment. That moment traditionally came with Dad's Thanksgiving toast. After the main course was served but before dessert, he would stand, glass raised, and deliver his annual speech about gratitude, success, and family loyalty. Then he'd invite each person to share what they were thankful for, a Carter family tradition. When the turkey and sides had been distributed and wine glasses refilled, Dad pushed back his chair and stood. The room quieted immediately. "Another year has passed," he began, his charismatic smile encompassing the table, "and once again, we have much to be grateful for. Carter Investment Group has exceeded projections for the 8th consecutive quarter." Approving murmurs circled the table. "But more important than financial success is the success of relationships. The trust you've placed in our family. The loyalty we share." His eyes lingered on me, and I met his gaze steadily. "In uncertain times, we must remember what matters most, protecting our own, standing united, maintaining the legacy we've built together." He raised his glass. "To family, friends, and unwavering loyalty." "To loyalty," the table echoed, glasses raised. Dad remained standing. "As is our tradition, I'd like each of you to share something you're thankful for this year. Catherine, would you begin?" Catherine Miller smiled. "I'm thankful for good health and the security of knowing our retirement is in such capable hands." My chest tightened as others took their turns, expressing gratitude for prosperity, family, the wisdom of Nathan Carter's financial guidance. When David's turn came, he simply said, "I'm thankful for integrity and truth," his hand briefly touching mine beneath the table. Tyler went next. "I'm thankful for Dad's mentorship and the opportunity to continue the Carter legacy of excellence." Then it was my turn. All eyes turned expectantly. Dad's expression was warning and question combined. I stood slowly, glass in hand. "This year, I'm thankful for clarity." My voice was steadier than I expected. "I'm thankful for finally seeing the truth, even when it's painful." Confused glances were exchanged around the table. Dad's smile tightened. "Allison," he said lightly, "perhaps something more conventional?" "Your health, your career?" "My career." I nodded. "Let's talk about that. Let's talk about Carter Investment Group and what really happens behind closed doors." The room fell silent. Mom's face drained of color. "Perhaps this isn't the time," Dad began, but I cut him off. "When is the time to discuss fraud, Dad? When is the right moment to talk about stealing from your clients? From your family?" Gasps circled the table. Bill Henderson's fork clattered against his plate. Dad's face hardened. "Allison, you're obviously unwell. Sit down." "I'm not unwell. I'm finally seeing clearly." I turned to the table. For 3 years, Nathan Carter has been systematically transferring funds from client accounts into offshore holdings under his control. He's falsified performance reports. He's stolen from his own family's trusts. And he has an exit strategy to abandon everything, including all of you, if he's discovered. "This is absurd," Dad snapped, fury building. "Allison is clearly having some kind of breakdown." "Is she?" Aunt Lydia's cool voice cut through the chaos. "Then explain why $1.2 million is missing from my trust fund, Nathan. Or why our last quarterly statement showed a 12% return when the actual return was negative," Robert Miller added, his hands shaking as he reached for his water glass. Dad's strategy shifted instantly. "These are complex investment strategies that might appear irregular to the untrained eye. If there are concerns, we can discuss them privately." "I have copies of everything," I said clearly. "The real statements. The falsified reports. The transfers. The offshore accounts. The contingency plan." For a fraction of a second, fear flashed across my father's face before rage replaced it. He slammed his hand on the table, making the crystal jump. "This is how you repay everything I've given you? With baseless accusations at a family gathering? Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I know exactly what I've done," I replied. "I've chosen truth over loyalty to a criminal." Dad's face contorted with fury. You're no longer my daughter. His voice was ice. You're no longer a Carter. Get out of my house. You're cut off, financially, professionally, personally. You'll never work in finance again when I'm finished with you. Tyler stood, face flushed with confusion and anger. Dad, what the hell is happening? Allison, have you lost your mind? Ask him, Tyler. Ask him what happened to your trust fund. Ask him why certain client accounts are kept off the main server. Mom began to cry softly, hands pressed to her mouth. Nathan, tell them it isn't true. Tell them Allison is confused. But Dad was beyond pretense now. He pointed at me, trembling with rage. Get out. Now. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder, placing it on the table. This contains preliminary evidence of what I've found. The SEC receives the complete file tomorrow morning. I suggest you all contact securities attorneys immediately. I stood, surprisingly calm. I'm sorry it came to this. Truly. The room erupted in chaos, clients demanding explanations, relatives arguing with each other, Tyler shouting questions at Dad, who had gone deathly silent, staring at me with pure hatred. I walked toward the door, legs surprisingly steady. David followed, placing a supportive hand on my back. Behind us, Aunt Lydia grabbed her purse and coat, hurrying to catch up. Allison. Mom's desperate voice called after me. Please don't do this to our family. I paused at the door, turning to face the wreckage of the perfect Carter Thanksgiving. Dad did this, Mom. Not me. I just exposed it. As the front door closed behind us, the cold November air hit my face like a splash of reality. It was done. For better or worse, there was no going back. Aunt Lydia squeezed my arm. You did the right thing, my brave girl. David nodded. The hardest right thing I've ever witnessed. I looked back at the house where I'd grown up, holiday lights twinkling obliviously against the gathering darkness. Inside, my former life was imploding. Ahead lay uncertainty, but also truth. I took a deep breath and walked to my car, leaving behind everything I'd ever known. The days following Thanksgiving unfolded in a blur of emotional whiplash. I moved into Aunt Lydia's guest room in Boston, far enough from Connecticut to avoid accidental encounters with family but close enough to remain accessible to the investigators now swarming Carter Investment Group. My phone bombarded me with texts and calls, some supportive, most accusatory. Tyler's messages evolved from confused anger, what the actual fuck Allison, to pleading, please talk to me, we can fix this, to threatening, you'll regret destroying our family. Mom left tearful voicemails begging me to stop this madness before it's too late. Dad, predictably, communicated only through his attorneys, who sent a cease and desist letter demanding I retract my defamatory statements or face legal action. I forwarded it all to Lawrence Hoffman, who assured me their threats were empty. The evidence speaks for itself, he said during our daily check-in calls. They're posturing from a position of weakness. The morning after Thanksgiving, as promised, I had submitted my complete evidence file to the SEC. By Monday, federal investigators had obtained warrants to search Carter Investment Group offices and freeze certain company assets. The business press caught wind of the story by Wednesday, and suddenly the Carter name appeared in headlines with words like alleged fraud and investment scandal. Clients fled in droves. Some, like the Millers, contacted me directly, their voices shaking with fear and betrayal. Is there anything left of our money, Allison? Catherine asked during a heart-wrenching call. We're too old to start over. The truth was brutal, nearly 60% of their retirement savings had been misappropriated. All I could offer was my testimony and the name of a good securities attorney who might help them recover something through insurance and victim restitution funds. David faced his own fallout. Dad fired him immediately, of course, but David had anticipated this and secured a compliance position at a larger firm in Boston before Thanksgiving. He had visited me almost daily at Aunt Lydia's, our relationship deepening amid the chaos. His steady presence became my anchor when everything else felt adrift. "You should have seen your father's face when the federal agents arrived," he told me over dinner at Aunt Lydia's a week after Thanksgiving. He kept insisting there had been a misunderstanding even as they were boxing up documents. Tyler was shouting about witch hunts and family betrayal. It was pandemonium. "And Mom?" I asked, dreading the answer. David's expression softened. She looked lost. Just sitting in her office, watching it all happen. The image made my chest ache. Despite everything, I worried about her most. Dad had options, illegal money likely squirreled away, connections with unsavory characters who might help him. Tyler had his own network and enough Carter charm to land on his feet. But Mom had surrendered her identity to the Carter name decades ago. Who was Grace Carter without Nathan's success defining her? Aunt Lydia provided surprising emotional stability through it all. At 65, she approached the scandal with pragmatic acceptance. "Your father was always headed for this end," she said one evening as we shared tea in her study. "Even as a child, Nathan believed rules applied to everyone but him. My only regret is not seeing the financial manipulation sooner. I keep thinking about all the people hurt by this," I confessed. "Was there a way to handle it without such public destruction?" She took my hand. "When cancer invades a body, the treatment is often brutal, but necessary. Your father's deception was a cancer. The treatment is painful, but the alternative was worse." Not everyone shared her perspective. Old family friends chose sides, most distancing themselves from the Carter name entirely. My cousin Jennifer, once my closest childhood friend, texted, "How could you humiliate us like this? Thanksgiving dinner? Really?" Whatever Dad did, there were other ways. But there had been unexpected allies too. James from accounting, who had misfiled those original documents, reached out to offer additional evidence. Several junior analysts sent supportive messages, revealing they'd had suspicions but feared career suicide by speaking up. Most surprising was the call from Evelyn Henderson, Bill's wife, who had been quietly investigating their own financial irregularities before my revelation. "You were brave when the rest of us were cowards," she said simply. "Thank you." By the 2-week mark, the initial shock had settled into a grinding new reality. I established a routine. Morning calls with Hoffman, afternoon meetings with investigators, evenings trying to piece together what my future might look like. My frozen assets meant living on savings and Aunt Lydia's generosity, but the SEC had expedited my status as a whistleblower, which offered some protection and potential financial recovery down the line. The most difficult moment came when Tyler appeared unannounced at Aunt Lydia's doorstep. I was alone in the house, and against my better judgment, I let him in. He looked terrible, unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, designer clothes wrinkled as if he'd slept in them. For a moment, seeing my brother so diminished, I questioned everything I'd done. "They're saying Dad could face 20 years, were his first words, standing awkwardly in Aunt Lydia's elegant foyer. "Did you know that when you went to the authorities?" "I knew there would be serious consequences," I replied carefully. "That's what happens with securities fraud of this magnitude." "He's our father, Allison." Tyler exploded, pacing the hallway. "Family protects family. We could have handled this internally, found a way to make it right without destroying everything." Like Dad was going to voluntarily return millions in stolen money? He had an exit strategy, Tyler. He was preparing to abandon all of us if necessary. "You don't know that." "I saw the documents." I fought to keep my voice steady. "I saw the accounts." "Did you check your trust fund like I suggested?" "Did you?" His silence was answer enough. "He stole from you too," I said more gently. "From all of us." Tyler sank onto a bench, head in his hands. "The firm is finished. Clients are suing. My reputation is toxic by association. Everything I worked for, gone." "Everything you worked for was built on fraud," I reminded him. "Would you rather have continued unknowingly participating in a criminal enterprise until it inevitably collapsed?" Because it would have collapsed, Tyler. These schemes always do. He looked up, eyes red-rimmed. Did you ever consider what this would do to Mom? She's practically catatonic. Barely eating. Her friends won't even call her. The guilt I'd been suppressing surged back. I'm sorry about Mom. Truly. But what was the alternative? Let Dad keep stealing from elderly clients? From our family? From you? You could have warned me, he said bitterly. Given me a chance to prepare. Would you have kept it from Dad? His silence answered that question too. After Tyler left, I cried for the first time since Thanksgiving, not delicate tears, but ugly, gulping sobs that left me exhausted. I cried for the clients who trusted us, for Mom's shattered world, for Tyler's misplaced loyalty, and yes, even for Dad, who had built something meaningful only to destroy it through greed and arrogance. But beneath the grief was a small, growing sense of purpose. What I'd done might have destroyed the Carter name, but it had preserved something more important, my integrity. I couldn't undo the damage Dad had caused, but I could be part of rebuilding something better from the ashes. The next morning, I called Hoffman with a new idea. I want to help recover as much money as possible for the victims, I told him. I know where to look, how Dad operated. I can assist the forensic accountants. That's unusually proactive for someone in your position, he replied cautiously. This isn't just about exposing wrongdoing anymore, I explained. It's about making things right. That afternoon, I began working with the SEC's forensic team, creating maps of Dad's financial shell game. It wouldn't restore everything lost, but it was a start. A way forward through the wreckage. My own form of atonement for the Carter name. 1 month after Thanksgiving, I stood in the lobby of the federal courthouse, watching reporters cluster around Lawrence Hoffman as he delivered a statement about Nathan Carter's arraignment. The formal charges were devastating: 23 counts of securities fraud, wire fraud, investment advisor fraud, and tax evasion. If convicted on all counts, Dad faced up to 30 years in prison. I had declined to appear at the arraignment, unable to bear seeing him in handcuffs despite everything he'd done. The media had been relentless in pursuing me, whistleblower daughter made for compelling headlines, but Hoffman had kept them at bay, issuing statements on my behalf while I focused on helping the investigation. My phone buzzed with a text from David, "It's done. Not guilty plea, as expected. $10 million bail posted. We should celebrate tonight." Celebrate felt like the wrong word for watching your father's public disgrace, but I understood what David meant. Each legal step brought us closer to resolution, to whatever new reality waited on the other side of this ordeal. The past month had transformed everything. The SEC investigation had expanded beyond even my discoveries, revealing a decade-long pattern of financial manipulation. Dad had stolen over $43 million from clients and family members, using the money to maintain his lavish lifestyle and make risky investments to cover mounting losses. The financial genius was actually a desperate gambler trying to stay one step ahead of his collapsing scheme. The most shocking revelation came when investigators discovered Dad had begun liquidating assets and transferring funds to accounts in the Cayman Islands 2 days before Thanksgiving. He had sensed something was wrong and was preparing to flee. If I had waited even another week to come forward, he might have disappeared with millions, leaving everyone else to face the consequences. This discovery transformed public perception of my actions. Business journals that initially questioned my motives now praised my ethical courage. Former clients who blamed me for exposing the fraud began thanking me for preventing further losses. Even some family members grudgingly acknowledged I had done the necessary thing, if not in the most diplomatic way. Tyler's perspective shifted dramatically when he learned about Dad's escape preparations. He called me late one night, his voice tight with controlled fury. He was going to run, he said without preamble. Leave us all holding the bag while he lived it up on a beach somewhere. Did you know? I knew he had contingency plans, I admitted. Not that he had actually started implementing them. I trusted him completely. Tyler's voice cracked slightly. defended him to everyone, made excuses. And he was ready to abandon me, abandon all of us, without a second thought. I'm sorry, Tyler. A long pause. No, I'm sorry. For what I said to you. For not believing you. It wasn't full reconciliation, but it was a start. Tyler and I began speaking regularly, sharing information as he struggled to salvage what he could of his professional reputation. He had resigned from Carter Investment Group immediately after Dad's arrest and was cooperating with authorities to demonstrate his own innocence. Mom's transformation was slower but perhaps more profound. For weeks after Thanksgiving, she refused my calls, communicating only through terse texts. Then one afternoon, Aunt Lydia called. "Your mother is here," she said without preamble. "She wants to see you." I rushed home to find Mom sitting stiffly in Lydia's living room, looking thinner and older but impeccably dressed as always. When I entered, she stood, smoothing her skirt with trembling hands. "Allison," she said formally, as if greeting an acquaintance. "Mom." I stepped toward her, unsure if I should attempt a hug. "I'm so glad you came." "Your father is selling the house," she said, her voice carefully controlled. "To pay legal fees and victim restitution. I'm moving into the condo in New York." "I didn't know," I said, feeling a pang for the home where I'd grown up, despite everything. "I'm sorry." "Are you?" A flash of anger broke through her composed facade. "Are you sorry for any of this, Allison?" "I'm sorry for the pain it's caused you," I said honestly. "I'm sorry Dad put us all in this position. I'm not sorry for exposing the truth." She nodded slightly, as if I'd confirmed something. "I've spent 30 years building a life around your father. Supporting him. Believing in him." She took a shaky breath. "I need to know, was any of it real? Or was I just another fool he manipulated?" The vulnerability in her question broke my heart. "I think Dad loves you in his way," I said carefully. "But he loves himself more. He always has." Mom's carefully constructed composure crumbled. She covered her face with her hands, shoulders shaking. I moved forward instinctively, putting my arms around her for the first time since before Thanksgiving. "I knew," she whispered against my shoulder. "Not the details, but I knew something wasn't right. The late-night phone calls. The secretive meetings. The inconsistencies in what he told me about the business." She pulled back to look at me, eyes swimming with tears. "I chose not to see it." "What does that make me?" "Human," I said simply. "We all wanted to believe in him." That afternoon marked a turning point. Mom began therapy, started reconnecting with old friends she'd neglected during her marriage, and even enrolled in finance courses to understand what had happened with the family money. She would never be the same woman who had organized perfect dinner parties and deferred to Dad on every decision, but perhaps this new version of Grace Carter would find more authentic happiness. Meanwhile, the business world was monitoring the Carter Investment Group implosion as a cautionary tale. Financial publications ran analyses of how the fraud had continued undetected for so long. Ethics professors used the case in their curriculum. Former employees scrambled to distance themselves from the scandal while positioning for new opportunities in the wreckage. I continued working with the recovery team, using my insider knowledge to trace hidden assets. We managed to recover nearly $18 million, less than half of what was stolen, but more than initially expected. The funds would be distributed to victims based on their losses, providing some relief if not complete restoration. The most dramatic development came when Dad, facing overwhelming evidence and the prospect of a very public trial, attempted to flee. Despite surrendering his passport as a condition of bail, he had obtained false identification and was apprehended at a private airfield trying to board a chartered plane to a non-extradition country. The news broke while I was having dinner with David at his new apartment in Boston. "Nathan Carter arrested attempting to flee country," the headline flashed across David's TV. We watched in stunned silence as footage showed Dad being escorted into a police vehicle, his distinguished facade crumbling into the desperate expression of a cornered man. I wish I could say I'm surprised, I finally said, setting down my wineglass. David took my hand. This changes everything legally. Bail jumping, attempted flight, the judge will revoke bail immediately. He'll be in custody until trial, and this will weigh heavily in sentencing. My father would be going to jail, tonight, and would likely remain there for years, possibly the rest of his life. The reality I had set in motion hit me with physical force. I need some air, I said, moving to David's balcony. The December night was cold, the Boston skyline glittering against the dark sky. David followed, wrapping his coat around my shoulders. Having second thoughts? He asked gently. No, I said after a moment. Just processing. I didn't expect to feel sad for him. Not after everything. It's complicated because he's your father. You can hate what he did and still mourn what should have been. I leaned against him, drawing strength from his steadiness. The strangest part is that I feel like I'm finally free of his approval. I spent my whole life trying to earn it, and now. I gestured vaguely at the news still playing inside. None of that matters anymore. David turned me to face him. You did something extraordinarily brave, Allison. You chose right over easy, truth over comfort. That's who you really are, not just Nathan Carter's daughter. His words crystallized something I'd been feeling but couldn't articulate. In exposing my father, I had found myself. Whatever came next would be on my terms, shaped by my values, not his shadow. The next morning, I received an unexpected call from Bill Henderson, one of Dad's oldest clients and victims. I'm convening a meeting of major stakeholders, he said without preamble. To discuss salvaging what's left of Carter Investment Group. We need someone who understands the firm but isn't implicated in the fraud. Someone with integrity and expertise. Are you asking for recommendations? I asked, confused. I'm asking if you'd consider taking the lead, he replied. Not immediately, there's the trial and regulatory hurdles to navigate. But eventually. Building something legitimate from what remains. I was speechless. After everything that's happened, you'd trust me with that? Because of everything that's happened, he corrected. You proved your character in the hardest possible way, Allison. Think about it. I did think about it, obsessively, over the following days. The idea of rebuilding from the ashes of my father's disgrace was simultaneously terrifying and compelling. It would mean confronting the damage daily, facing skepticism and scrutiny, working under a microscope of regulatory oversight. It would also mean a chance to make things right, to create the ethical firm I had always believed Carter Investment Group to be. When Mom called to tell me she was meeting with her own attorney to file for divorce, her voice held a new strength. Your father called from detention, she said. He wanted me to use the condo as collateral for new legal fees. Can you believe it? Still trying to manipulate from behind bars. What did you say? I asked. I told him he had taken enough from me. The pride in her voice was unmistakable. It's time I protected myself. Hearing Mom stand up to Dad, even in this small way, felt like witnessing a miracle. If she could rebuild her life at 60, perhaps there was hope for all of us. A week before Christmas, Tyler invited me to coffee. He looked better than during his visit to Aunt Lydia's. Still stressed but more focused, less defeated. I've been offered a position at Merrill Lynch, he said. Junior VP, fresh start. They like that I cooperated with investigators from the beginning. That's fantastic, Tyler. You deserve it. He stirred his coffee absently. What about you? What's next? I told him about Henderson's proposition to eventually rebuild the firm. You'd keep the Carter name? He asked incredulously. No, I said firmly. That name is finished in financial circles. But the infrastructure, the client relationships that can be salvaged, maybe something new could emerge. Tyler considered this. It won't be easy. Nothing worthwhile ever is. He raised his cup in a small toast. To new beginnings, then. As Christmas approached, I found myself settling into a strange new normal. The media frenzy had subsided somewhat. Dad remained in federal custody awaiting trial, his attempt to flee having destroyed any chance of release. The family home was on the market. Carter Investment Group existed as a legal entity only, its operations suspended pending regulatory review. Yet amid the wreckage, new possibilities were emerging. Mom was discovering independence. Tyler was rebuilding his career. Aunt Lydia had become a vocal advocate for investment fraud awareness. And I was cautiously exploring what it might mean to create something honest from the ruins of my father's deception. The tables had turned completely. Dad, who had threatened to destroy me professionally and personally for exposing him, now sat powerless as I considered taking control of the very business he had built and corrupted. His empire had crumbled, but from its ashes, something better might rise, not a monument to ego and greed, but a testament to resilience and integrity. As I prepared for my first Christmas away from the family home, I realized that exposing my father had not been the end of something, as I'd initially feared, but the beginning. The beginning of truth, of authentic relationships, of a life governed by my own values rather than someone else's expectations. The cost had been enormous, but the freedom on the other side was priceless. 3 months after that fateful Thanksgiving dinner, spring arrived with tentative new beginnings. The criminal case against my father was proceeding steadily, with a trial date set for September. He remained in federal custody, his lawyers having exhausted appeals for bail after his attempted flight. The family home had sold for well below market value, the Carter name now toxic in Connecticut social circles, and Mom had settled into her Manhattan condo, filing for divorce after 34 years of marriage. Meanwhile, I had moved from Aunt Lydia's guest room into a modest apartment in Boston's Back Bay, close enough to David for our relationship to deepen naturally but maintaining my independence as I figured out next steps. The SEC had unfrozen my personal accounts after confirming I had no involvement in the fraud, and my whistleblower status provided some financial security while I considered professional options. Bill Henderson hadn't abandoned his vision of salvaging something from the ruins of Carter Investment Group. He convened a meeting of former clients who hadn't completely written off the firm, hosting us in his Beacon Hill home one rainy April evening. The brand is unsalvageable, he acknowledged, addressing the 12 people seated around his dining table. But the operational framework, the client relationships, the expertise, these have value. Robert Miller, still recovering from the financial and emotional blow of my father's betrayal, looked skeptical. Why bother? There are plenty of established firms we could move our remaining assets to. Because Allison Carter understands what went wrong, Bill replied, nodding toward me. She's seen the vulnerabilities from the inside. Who better to build something truly secure? All eyes turned to me, expressions ranging from curious to doubtful. I took a deep breath. What my father built was rotten at its core, I began, but not because the fundamental concept was flawed. The flaw was in the governance, one man with too much power and too little oversight. What I envision is fundamentally different, a firm with complete transparency, multiple layers of compliance review, and client representation on the board of directors. Catherine Miller, who had lost 60% of her retirement savings to my father's fraud, leaned forward. You really think you can create something trustworthy from this mess? I think that's the only reason to try, I replied honestly. Not to salvage what was, but to build something better in its place. The discussion continued for hours, moving from skepticism to cautious interest. By evening's end, 7 of the 12 former clients had expressed willingness to consider investing in a new entity if proper safeguards were established. It wasn't a resounding endorsement, but it was a start, a foundation to build upon. The following week, I met with Lawrence Hoffman to discuss legal pathways forward. You're proposing to acquire the operational assets of Carter Investment Group without the liabilities or the name, he summarized, reviewing my notes. Essentially a phoenix rising from the ashes. Is it possible? I asked. Complicated but not impossible. He tapped his pen thoughtfully. You'd need regulatory approval, which means convincing the SEC you represent a clean break from past management. you'd need capital. You'd need to address the outstanding claims against the old firm. I've been working with the recovery team for months, I reminded him. We've tracked down more hidden assets than anyone expected. That should count for something. It will, he agreed. Your whistleblower status and subsequent cooperation are significant assets. But Allison, he leaned forward, expression serious, you need to understand what you're taking on. The scrutiny will be intense. Every decision questioned. The Carter connection will follow you for years. I'm not running from my name, I said firmly. I'm redefining what it means. With Hoffman's guidance, I began the complex process of establishing Phoenix Capital Partners, the name a deliberate acknowledgement of what we were attempting. Tyler, now settled in his role at Merrill Lynch, offered advice from a distance, our relationship gradually healing through our shared understanding of what Dad had done to all of us. The most unexpected ally emerged in my mother. One Sunday afternoon, she invited me to her condo for tea, the space already transformed from Dad's preferred dark masculine aesthetic to something lighter, more reflective of her emerging self. I've been following your progress with Phoenix, she said, pouring Earl Grey into delicate cups I didn't recognize. Apparently, she'd left the family china behind with other remnants of her former life. It's early days, I cautioned. Lots of hurdles ahead. I want to invest, she stated simply. I nearly choked on my tea. Mom, you don't have to do that. I'm not doing it for you. A small smile played at her lips. I'm doing it for me. The divorce settlement will be finalized next month. For the first time in my adult life, I'll have assets that are truly mine. I want them managed by someone I trust. After everything that happened. Because of everything that happened, she corrected, echoing Bill Henderson's words months earlier. You stood up for what's right when it would have been easier to look away. That's exactly who should be managing my money. Mom's confidence boosted my own resolve. If she could rebuild her life at 60, finding strength and independence after decades of submission, perhaps Phoenix really could emerge successfully from the ashes of Carter Investment Group. David provided both emotional support and practical expertise as I navigated the complex regulatory requirements for the new firm. Our relationship had deepened amid the chaos, neither of us wanting to rush into living together but spending most evenings at one another's apartments. Have you considered reaching out to your father? He asked one night as we reviewed compliance protocols for Phoenix. He's still refusing to meet with Tyler. The question caught me off guard. I hadn't spoken to Dad since Thanksgiving, had deliberately avoided attending his arraignment and subsequent hearings. What would be the point? I asked. He'll never forgive me for exposing him. Not for his sake, David clarified. For yours. Closure. I considered this. Maybe after the trial. When everything settled. The truth was, I wasn't ready to face my father. The anger and betrayal remained too raw, the memory of his threats too vivid. Perhaps someday I could view him with detached compassion, the brilliant, flawed man who had shaped me through both positive and negative examples. But not yet. By June, Phoenix Capital Partners had moved from concept to emerging reality. We secured modest office space in Boston's financial district, deliberately understated compared to the opulent Carter Investment Group headquarters. I hired a skeleton staff of 5, including 2 former Carter employees who had been peripheral to the fraud and eagerly seized the chance at redemption. James, the accountant whose misfiled documents had started this entire journey, was my first hire. I should have noticed the irregularities sooner, he admitted during his interview. I had suspicions but convinced myself I was misinterpreting things. We all did, I assured him. What matters is building something better now. Our first client meeting was nerve-wracking. Bill Henderson had gathered 15 potential investors, all former Carter clients who had lost money but retained enough to consider reinvesting. I presented our vision for Phoenix: complete transparency, triple-layer compliance reviews, client representation on the oversight board, and conservative investment strategies. The days of flashy returns and aggressive growth projections are over, I told them honestly. What we offer instead is security, integrity, and steady, sustainable growth. To my surprise, 12 of the 15 signed preliminary commitment letters that day. As Bill explained later over celebratory drinks, they're not just investing in a financial strategy. They're investing in you. The woman who sacrificed everything to do the right thing. His words made me uncomfortable even as they bolstered my confidence. I didn't want to be seen as some ethical paragon. I had ignored red flags for years before finally acting. My motives hadn't been purely altruistic, I'd been angry, hurt, betrayed. Yet the narrative of the whistleblower daughter had taken on a life of its own, becoming an asset to Phoenix even as I tried to focus on the future rather than the past. Tyler called the night after our first major client commitment, sounding genuinely pleased for me despite his initial resistance to the Phoenix concept. Henderson told me about the meeting, he said. 12 commitments is impressive. Still a long way from the hundreds of clients Dad managed, I noted. Quality over quantity, Tyler replied, then hesitated. Listen, I visited Dad yesterday. My stomach tightened. How is he? Different. Subdued. Prison hasn't been kind to a man who's used to controlling everything. Tyler's voice turned somber. He asked about you. What did you tell him? The truth. That you're building something from the wreckage. That mom is filing for divorce. That Aunt Lydia has become the family matriarch by default. And how did he take it? Hard to tell. He's gotten good at hiding his reactions. Tyler paused. He did say one thing about you specifically. He said, she always was the strongest of all of us. I just didn't want to see it. The words hit me with unexpected force. After a lifetime seeking Dad's approval, to receive it now, in these circumstances, felt like a cruel irony. Yet something in me eased slightly at the knowledge that he recognized, finally, what I had always tried to show him. Thanks for telling me, I said quietly. July brought the first official day of operations for Phoenix Capital Partners. We began with 18 clients and $22 million under management. A fraction of Carter Investment Group's peak, but a solid foundation. Every detail of the new firm reflected our commitment to transparency, from the glass-walled offices to the client portal that provided real-time access to account activities. Aunt Lydia became our unofficial ambassador, hosting small gatherings to introduce potential clients to our philosophy. Mom invested her divorce settlement as promised, becoming our largest individual client and volunteering to serve on the client advisory board. Even Tyler referred 2 colleagues who were looking for more conservative management options. As summer progressed, Phoenix established itself as a boutique firm specializing in ethical investing and transparent management. The Carter scandal had faded from headlines, replaced by newer financial dramas, though industry insiders still followed our progress with curiosity. Several financial publications requested interviews about rebuilding after fraud, which I politely declined. This wasn't about publicity or redemption narratives. It was about creating something sustainable and trustworthy. In August, a month before Dad's scheduled trial, his attorneys approached prosecutors with a plea offer. After lengthy negotiations, he agreed to plead guilty to 8 counts in exchange for a recommended sentence of 12 years. The deal included full cooperation in recovering additional assets and testimony against 2 associates who had knowingly assisted in the fraud. Mom, Tyler, and I gathered at Aunt Lydia's to discuss whether we would attend the plea hearing. I can't face him, Mom said simply. Not yet. Maybe never. Tyler rubbed his temples. I feel obligated to go. He's still our father, despite everything. I'll go with you, I decided, surprising myself. We should hear it directly, not through attorneys or news reports. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, though crowded with media, victims, and curious financial professionals. Dad was brought in wearing a standard-issue jumpsuit, handcuffed and looking visibly aged since Thanksgiving. His confident posture was gone, replaced by the careful movements of a man trying to preserve dignity in humiliating circumstances. When he spotted Tyler and me in the gallery, he froze momentarily, something flashing across his face. Shame? Regret? Anger? It passed too quickly to interpret. He nodded slightly in acknowledgement before turning toward the judge. The proceeding was clinical and efficient. Dad admitted to orchestrating a decade-long fraud, stealing from clients and family members, falsifying reports, and attempting to flee justice. The only emotion he displayed came when asked if he had been threatened or coerced into pleading guilty. "No," he said, voice raspy from disuse. "I've done enough damage. It's time to face consequences." As he was led away after the hearing, he turned once more toward Tyler and me. Our eyes met briefly across the courtroom, the man who had shaped my existence through both his strengths and fatal flaws, and me, the daughter who had both loved and exposed him. No words were exchanged, none needed. In that moment of silent acknowledgement lay the complicated truth of family, the inescapable bonds that remain even when trust is shattered. Outside the courthouse, reporters clamored for comments. Tyler and I pushed through silently until one question pierced the chaos. "Ms. Carter, do you feel vindicated by your father's admission of guilt?" I paused, considering. This was never about vindication, I finally responded. It was about truth. About responsibility. My father has taken responsibility for his actions today. Now we all move forward. Back at my apartment that evening, I sat alone on my balcony, watching the sunset paint Boston's skyline in shades of gold and pink. Dad would be sentenced in 6 weeks, likely spending a decade or more in federal prison. Mom was building a new life centered on her own interests rather than his needs. Tyler was establishing himself independent of the Carter name. And I was laying foundations for something that might, with time and diligence, restore what had been broken, not the family myth we had all participated in maintaining, but something more valuable, a legacy of integrity built from the painful lessons of its absence. David arrived with takeout and quiet understanding, settling beside me as night fell over the city. 12 years, he said softly. How are you feeling? I considered the question carefully. Like this chapter is ending, but the story continues. Phoenix is just beginning. Mom is just discovering her independence. The clients are still recovering. I leaned against his shoulder. It's not a neat resolution, but maybe those don't exist outside of movies. They don't, he agreed. But there are new beginnings. Second chances. Redemption, though it never looks like we expect. As stars appeared in the darkening sky, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me since that Thanksgiving confrontation. The path forward wasn't clear or certain, but it was authentic, built on truth rather than illusion, strength rather than intimidation, transparency rather than deception. My father had constructed a house of cards that inevitably collapsed. I was laying a foundation stone by stone, each one solid and visible. It would take years to complete, but unlike his creation, mine was designed to last. 1 year after the confrontation that shattered our family, I stood in Aunt Lydia's kitchen arranging flowers for a very different kind of Thanksgiving gathering. The guest list was smaller, just 9 people compared to last year's 24, but felt more authentic than any Carter family event I could remember. Mom arrived first, bringing homemade cranberry sauce and a newfound confidence that suited her better than any designer outfit. At 61, Grace Carter had reinvented herself, taking financial management courses, joining a book club, even dating occasionally. Her divorce had been finalized in July, freeing her from the shadow of Dad's disgrace. The table looks beautiful, she commented, surveying Aunt Lydia's elegant dining room. Different, but beautiful. That's our theme this year, I smiled. Different but beautiful. Tyler arrived with his new girlfriend, Emma, a pediatric surgeon he'd met through mutual friends, not the usual socialite Dad would have approved. They had been dating for 5 months, and I'd never seen my brother so relaxed, so genuinely himself. No shop talk today, he announced, handing me a bottle of wine. I promised Emma a normal family dinner. Normal might be setting the bar too high, I laughed, but we'll aim for functional. The Millers came next, Robert and Catherine, who had been devastated by Dad's fraud but had become Phoenix Capital's most vocal supporters. Through our recovery efforts and their insurance, they had reclaimed nearly 75% of their lost investments. More importantly, they had found peace with what couldn't be recovered. Who would have thought we'd be celebrating Thanksgiving with the Carters after everything? Catherine remarked, embracing me warmly. Life takes unexpected turns. David arrived last, having stopped to pick up Aunt Lydia's favorite dessert from a specialty bakery across town. Our relationship had deepened steadily throughout the year, weathering the stresses of my father's legal proceedings and Phoenix's challenging launch. We had recently begun discussing moving in together, taking our time to ensure we were building something lasting rather than seeking comfort amid chaos. As we gathered around Aunt Lydia's table, smaller than the massive Carter dining table but somehow more inviting, I marveled at how much had changed in 12 months. Dad was 3 months into his 12-year sentence at a federal prison in Pennsylvania. The family home had new owners. Carter Investment Group existed only in court documents and cautionary business school case studies. Yet from those endings had come surprising new beginnings. Phoenix Capital Partners had established itself as a boutique firm with a growing reputation for ethical management and transparency. We now managed $47 million for 32 clients, modest by industry standards but significant given our origins and scandal. Aunt Lydia raised her glass. Before we eat, I'd like to revive the Carter tradition of sharing what we're thankful for. Though perhaps with more honesty than in years past. Her eyes twinkled. I'll start. I'm thankful for second acts. For the chance to rebuild what was broken on stronger foundations. I'm thankful for truth, Mom said, her voice steady. Even when it's painful. Even when it changes everything. Maybe especially then. I'm thankful for new perspectives, Tyler added, glancing at Emma. For learning that success isn't measured by the standards I grew up believing were important. When my turn came, I took a moment to find the right words. I'm thankful for the courage to start over. And for discovering that family isn't just who you're born to, but who stands with you when everything falls apart. After dinner, while others chatted in the living room, I slipped away to Aunt Lydia's study to check an email from our compliance officer. A notification from the prison communication system caught my eye, a message request from inmate number 25871, Nathan Carter. My father had not attempted to contact me since his imprisonment. I'd visited once, 2 months into his sentence, a stilted hour of careful conversation that left me more drained than enlightened. We had established a fragile truce. I would ensure Mom was financially secure, he would continue cooperating with asset recovery efforts, but little else. I opened the message with trepidation. Allison *. The psychologist here encourages amends letters as part of the rehabilitation process. I've started and deleted this message dozens of times, finding words inadequate for the situation we find ourselves in *. I won't ask forgiveness. What I did was unforgivable, not just the fraud, but how I treated you throughout your life. Diminishing your abilities. Dismissing your insights. Threatening you when you discovered the truth *. You were always the most like me in intelligence and determination, which perhaps explains my need to control your path. I feared being overtaken, outshone. A pathetic admission from a man who once prided himself on strength *. Reports of Phoenix's growth reach me even here. Not surprising. You've accomplished in 1 year what took me a decade, and you've done it honestly. That matters, though I learned too late to understand how much *. I have 11 years and 9 months remaining in this place. I harbor no illusions about our relationship recovering. Some damage can't be undone. But I wanted you to know that despite everything, I recognize what you've built from the wreckage I created. It's more than I deserved *. Your father *. Nathan *. I read the message twice, emotions conflicting. There was manipulation even in his confession, subtle self-aggrandizement, comparison of our achievements. Yet beneath the imperfect expression lay something I'd never expected from Nathan Carter, genuine acknowledgement of his failures and my strength. David found me still staring at the screen. Everything okay? I showed him the message. I don't know what to feel, I admitted. Part of me wants to dismiss this as another manipulation. Part of me wants to believe he's capable of change. David, read it carefully. Maybe both are true. People are complicated, especially those who've caused profound harm. You don't need to decide how you feel about it right now. He was right, of course. My relationship with my father, like everything else in the aftermath of his crimes, was evolving, complicated, unresolved. Perhaps it would always remain so. I rejoined the gathering, watching this unlikely assembly of people whose lives had been upended by Nathan Carter's actions now finding new connections through that shared experience. Mom was showing Emma family photos, carefully selected to exclude Dad. Tyler and Robert Miller were discussing economic forecasts with surprising camaraderie. Aunt Lydia and Catherine were planning a fundraiser for investment fraud awareness. This was my real inheritance. Not the Carter name or fortune, but the capacity to build authentic relationships from the ruins of deception. To create something meaningful from painful truth rather than comfortable lies. After dessert, David suggested a walk through Aunt Lydia's neighborhood, the night crisp with late November air. As we strolled beneath streetlights, arms linked against the cold, he seemed uncharacteristically nervous. "I've been thinking," he began, stopping beneath a massive oak tree. "This past year has shown me what really matters. Integrity. Courage. Building something meaningful together." He reached into his pocket, withdrawing a small velvet box. "I don't want to wait any longer to start our future." The ring was simple, elegant, nothing like the ostentatious jewelry Dad had given Mom to showcase his success. It represented exactly what David and I were building, authentic, transparent, solid. "Yes," I whispered, tears warming my cold cheeks. "Absolutely yes." When we returned to share the news, the celebration that erupted felt like a final transformation of the previous year's pain into something joyful. Tyler hugged me fiercely, whispering, "You deserve this happiness, sis." Mom cried happy tears, a stark contrast to last Thanksgiving's devastation. Aunt Lydia beamed with satisfaction, as if she'd orchestrated everything. Later that evening, as our guests prepared to leave, Catherine Miller embraced me. "When you exposed your father last year, you didn't just save us financially," she said quietly. "You showed us all what real courage looks like. Whatever comes next for you, Phoenix, marriage, family, you've already succeeded where it truly matters." Her words stayed with me as I helped clean up, reflecting on the journey from that disastrous Thanksgiving to this healing one. I had lost much: family stability, professional certainty, the comfort of ignorance. But I had gained something more valuable. The knowledge that I could face the hardest truths and not only survive but rebuild. Dad's email remained unanswered in my inbox. Perhaps someday I would respond. Perhaps not. His approval, once so desperately sought, no longer defined my worth. The tables had indeed turned, not through vengeance but through the quiet power of living with integrity when it would have been easier to look away. As David and I drove back to Boston that night, I thought about the upcoming year, the growth of Phoenix, our wedding plans, the continuing recovery efforts for Dad's victims. The road ahead would not be easy, but it would be honest. And that made all the difference. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have exposed the truth even knowing it would shatter your family? Drop a comment below to share your thoughts. And if this story of standing up for what's right resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life family stories. Thank you for joining me today, and remember, sometimes the hardest decisions lead to the most meaningful new beginnings. Happy Thanksgiving to you all.